as we were talking before we are recording, in terms of marketization, where we are going as a sector, because the dollars drives the behaviors, and the behaviors come from values, or values are created by the behaviors. It's a vice versa. So what do you think will happen in the coming near future?
Yeah, I think we've got a risk of a significant mismatch happening in the short to medium term, and some of that procurement framework that's being driven for funding in the sector is going to shape the behaviours in the sector around providers, and it'll be behaviours around what staff they hire, around the type of customer they try to target, around how they'll interact with any compliance activity, and particularly if the funding bodies are trying to drive down the price per person, and they'll talk in unit prices. Unit prices means that we're not even talking about people. We're talking about boxes we pull off a supermarket shelf.
Yeah.
And so some of that language is not conducive to caring for people in a really well-balanced way. And it doesn't even make us think about what the outcome of it is. It just makes us think about the inputs. And I think that's where we're in for some trouble.
And what's the timeline on that to execute all of that across Australia?
Look, I think in aged care, the reform process is a 5-year process. I think we'll be starting to see the side effects of that within 7 or 8 years. And I think they won't be easy issues for us to address, potentially because we've also got massively increasing demand in the same mix.
And you think that it'll push towards purpose misalignment?
I think it will, and my rationale for that is I've had a bit of time in the UK that drove down that model, and in some cases in the UK, some of the behaviours of the organisations and of government were really inappropriate. I can remember one local authority was auctioning the care of older people to the lowest bidder. I've got a fundamental ethical problem with that.
Yeah.
As a society, why do we judge the care of an older person to be worth less than the care of someone else?
So I think that's a big ethical issue for sure.
Yeah.
And as we are going down that path, and what happens with all purpose-driven organization when then dollar becomes the decision maker and they have to make those difficult choices?
Yeah, and for us, we've been faced with those difficult choices over the last 5 years. So as our financial circumstances have got harder and harder, we've had to make decisions about where we spend dollars and how we resource the organisation. And I think that's going to become even bigger. So to survive, organisations are going to have to really trim down on a whole lot of supports that you would necessarily put on the ground to deliver better quality care. And so you're either going to have to get big to be able to afford it, or you're going to have to run really small and stretch people way beyond their capacity. So I think there's a potential for failure in the system given that framework.
And is it happening across all human services sector, or is it just the aged care is different?
Well, I think it's already clearly happening in NDIS. It seems to be happening in a range of the federally funded services. State-based bodies have taken slightly different approaches, and state government funded services have taken slightly different approaches. But, and I'm trying to remember the term the state government uses, it's a similar model, but wrapped up in different paper, if you know what I mean.
Okay, yeah.
And I think one of the problems we have as a society is we're focused on efficiency and cost reduction without thinking through what the outcome or the output is. And so we're looking at a short-term injection for a longer-term issue, and that's always going to cause problems.
Yeah. And before we ask the last question, which I wanted to get a head around is, if you have to define the purpose in few lines or few words, your individual and organizational, how would you define it?
So for me individually, I want to be able to contribute to impacting people's lives for the better. That's really what I'm about. And our organisation is about, we want to care for people in not just a physical sense, but also for their emotional and their spiritual needs, regardless of who they are and where they come from. And that's and vulnerable or older people is who we're talking about in that sense.
Thank you.
And that's who we are.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing and thanks for spending this time with us.
Thank you.